Alright, let me talk to you for a second. If you live in a city, you already know this story. You just don't usually hear it told this way. This is the neighbor. Not a cape. Not a brand. Not a headline. This is about the dude you pass on the sidewalk and don't think twice about. The one who lives a few doors down. The one who knows which stores get hit, which blocks go quiet too early, and which corners you don't linger on after dark. I'm dropping this story one chapter a week here on YouTube. Each chapter is broken into 3 or 4 parts, because life doesn't happen all at once. It happens in pieces. Moments. Choices. This isn't a rush to the fight story. It's a watch it build story. You're gonna see Melvin before the world knows his name. Before the cameras. Before the pressure. Before people start asking what side he's on and who's paying him. Because at the start, nobody is. He's not trying to be a hero. He's trying to keep the block from falling apart. He steps in where the system doesn't. And once you do that long enough, people notice. Gangs notice. Corporations notice. Governments notice. And once they do, there's no going back. This series is about what happens before the legend. Before the costume. Before the myth. It's about proximity. Responsibility. And the price of being the one person who does something when everyone else keeps walking. So if you're here for clean wins and easy answers, this might not be for you. But if you've ever looked at your neighborhood and thought, somebody's got to step in, then yeah, you already get it. Welcome to The Neighbor. New chapters every week. 3 to 4 parts each. Lock in. Chapter 1. Part 1. The television clicked on before the sun came up. Blue light spilled across the room like spilled water, cold, unnatural, illuminating a coffee table with one chipped corner where someone had set down something too heavy too hard. The couch sagged in the middle, its cushions worn smooth by years of bodies that had nowhere better to sit. On the floor beside it, a man lay sprawled with one arm thrown across his eyes, chest rising and falling in the shallow rhythm of someone who'd only been asleep for 3 hours. Breaking news this morning. The voice cut through the silence like a blade. Sharp. Practiced. Awake in a way that normal people weren't at 5 a.m., in a way that suggested caffeine and teleprompters and a makeup artist who'd clocked in before most people dreamed. Melvin groaned low, guttural, the sound of a man who'd gone to bed sore and woken up worse. He rolled onto his side, letting the sound wash over him instead of the words. Sirens. Theme music. The low, insistent hum of urgency that always meant somebody else's night had gone catastrophically bad. On the screen, Patricia Jenkins stood in front of Melanon City's downtown skyline, her coat pressed sharp despite the hour, city lights still blinking behind her like they hadn't gotten the memo that morning was coming. Her expression was set, not quite a frown, not quite neutral, the face of someone who delivered bad news so many times it had become muscle memory. Good morning. I'm Patricia Jenkins with KMEL Channel 9. She didn't smile. She never smiled on the breaking news segments. At approximately 2 a.m., the Melanon City Federal Currency Recycling Center, located at the corner of Fannin and Pike Street, was robbed of an estimated $20 million in federal bills. Melvin's eyes opened. Not all the way. Just enough to see the screen through the gaps between his fingers, the blue light painting his face in flickering shadows. Behind Patricia, the image changed. A still frame from surveillance footage, grainy and green-tinted, the kind of visual quality that screamed government budget. Men in black tactical gear poured through a reinforced doorway like water through a crack in a dam. Smooth, coordinated, practiced. Surveillance video shows that at 1:57 a.m., a group of armed suspects dressed in military-style equipment stormed the facility. The image shifted again. A single figure stepped forward in the frame, bigger than the rest, broader, shoulders that looked like they could carry a small car. His arms were bare despite the tactical vest, muscles corded and tense, skin glistening under harsh fluorescent lights. Even in the low-res footage, You could see the way the other men moved around him. Not with him, but around him. The way water moves around stone. Patricia's voice didn't waver. The robbery was led by the enhanced criminal known as Grip. Melvin sat up. Fast. That name carried weight. Not myth weight. Not legend weight. Physical weight. The kind that bent steel rebar like wire hangers. The kind that crushed bone into splinters and left dents in concrete where there shouldn't have been any. Grip didn't run from cops. Grip didn't hide. Grip walked straight through things and let the world break around him. Because the world always did. Authorities have confirmed that 2 security officers were killed during the incident. 11 others suffered injuries ranging from gunshot wounds to blunt force trauma. The camera cut to the aftermath, flashing lights painting the street in alternating red and blue. Ambulances lined up like they were waiting for something worse. Blood on concrete, blurred just enough to be broadcast safe, but not enough to hide what it was. A white sheet covered something on the ground. Another one 10 feet away. A joint statement from the MCPD and the FBI's Melanon City field office is expected later this afternoon. Patricia paused. Just for a beat. Just long enough for the weight to settle. This is the largest cash theft in city history. The screen shifted to the weather teaser. Sunny later. High of 78. Great day for a jog. Melvin stared at the TV, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the spot where the white sheets had been. 2 dead. He swung his legs off the couch and rubbed his face hard, palms dragging down like he could wipe the night off the city himself, scrub it clean with friction and willpower. It didn't work. It never worked. Grip. Downtown. 2 in the morning. He'd been 3 neighborhoods away last night, stopping a domestic that turned out to be loud but not violent. Spent 40 minutes talking a man down from a bottle and a bad idea, standing in a doorway with his hands open and his voice low. Walked an old woman back to her apartment after. Helped her up 2 flights of stairs because the elevator had been broken since August. Fixed a busted lock with a screwdriver and hope. Kind of repair that would last maybe a week if she was lucky. All small things. Necessary things. Things that didn't make the news. The TV kept talking, but Melvin muted it. The anchor's mouth moved silently, gesturing toward a graphic that showed crime stats climbing in neat, color-coded bars. The room went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic starting up again outside, engines turning over, brakes hissing, the city stretching after a long, ugly sleep. Melvin leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands hanging loose between his legs. He stared at the muted screen, at Patricia Jenkins' face frozen mid-sentence, at the ticker scrolling across the bottom. Breaking. 2 dead in $20 million federal heist. Enhanced criminal grip suspected. MCPD investigating. Somewhere downtown, 2 families were waking up to a knock on the door they'd never forget. Somewhere else, $20 million was already gone, stacked in duffel bags or converted into something harder to trace, moving through pipelines Melvin didn't have access to and couldn't stop even if he did. And the day hadn't even started yet. He exhaled slow, stood up, and walked to the window. Outside, Catalan Springs was waking up. Lights flickering on in apartment windows. A man in an undershirt dragging a trash bin to the curb. A car pulling out of a driveway. Headlights cutting through the pre-dawn gray. Melvin pressed his forehead against the glass, felt the coolness of it. The faint vibration of the city humming beneath everything. 2 dead. He closed his eyes. And somewhere in the dark behind his ribs, something tightened like a fist. Part 2. The phone didn't ring. It never rang. It vibrated once, soft and specific. The kind of buzz that knew better than to make noise. A pulse against his hip, subtle as a secret. Melvin stood in the kitchen pulling on his hoodie, one sock already on, the other still balled in his hand like a question he hadn't answered yet. He checked the screen, thumb swiping automatic. No names, no emojis, no hey, or what's good, or any of the social padding people wrapped around urgency when they were scared to be direct. Just information. A photo, street corner, sodium lights painting everything orange and sick. A plate number, Texas 7YG, 2948. 3 words, happening now. The neighborhood watched in gossip. They didn't editorialize. They didn't ask questions or debate morality or wonder if maybe this time it wasn't their business. Everybody had learned that details save time, and time saved people. That was the whole point. Melvin scrolled. Another message came in before he finished reading the first one. Black Impala. Armed. South Bran. Southwick/Marlow Point. He nodded once to nobody, jaw tight. "All right," he said quietly, voice rough from not using it yet tonight. He slipped the phone into his pocket, grabbed his keys off the counter. Single key ring, no decorations, nothing that jingled, and headed out. The apartment door locked behind him with a soft metallic click that got swallowed by the hum of the building, the low thrum of 100 lives stacked on top of each other in cheap drywall and thinner patience. The Escalade turned over with a low, obedient growl, engine settling into its rhythm like it had been waiting. No music. Never music. Melvin drove with the windows cracked just enough to let the city talk to him. Tires on asphalt slick with evening rain. Distant arguments bleeding through thin walls. Laughter from a porch that turned sharp too fast and ended in a door slamming. He took I-65 south toward Southwick, merged smooth, kept it 5 under the limit because the last thing he needed was a traffic stop with no registration and a trunk full of zip ties. 15 minutes later, he parked under a carport with 2 lights burned out and one flickering like it was tired of pretending it still worked. Cut the engine. Sat for half a second, listening to the tick of cooling metal, the faint bass line from someone's party 3 buildings over. Then he got out and walked. No cape, no mask, no branding, no logo, no carefully curated public image designed to sell action figures and licensing deals. Just a big man in a dark hoodie moving like he didn't want attention and didn't need permission, shoulders rolled forward slightly, hands loose, eyes tracking everything. First stop, Marlow Point, 10:47 p.m. The carjacker didn't see him until it was too late. 1 second the guy was yanking a woman out of her seat by her purse strap, her phone clattering to the pavement, her voice high and breaking as she tried to hold on. The next, thump. Melvin hit him with a shoulder check that felt like running into a wall that decided to move back. Physics folded wrong. The man's feet left the ground, actually left it, airborne for a full second, and he came down hard on his side, ribs first, head bouncing off concrete with a sound like a basketball dropped from too high. He didn't get up. Concussion, probably. Maybe a cracked rib. Definitely done for the night. Melvin stepped over him, crouched down next to the woman still half in, half out of her Honda. She was shaking, hyperventilating, key still clutched in one white-knuckled fist. "You're okay," Melvin said, voice low, steady. "Get in. Lock the doors. Drive straight home. Don't stop." She stared at him, eyes wide, pupils blown. "Now," he added, not unkind but firm. She scrambled back into the driver's seat, slammed the door, hit the locks. Engine turned over. She peeled out without looking back, taillights disappearing into the maze of Marlow Point's parking lots. Melvin stood, glanced down at the carjacker still curled on the ground, groaning faintly. He nudged him once with his boot. No response. Good enough. He turned and walked back into the dark. She hadn't said thank you. She didn't need to. Second stop, Blake Gardens, 11:23 p.m. 3 men, all young, all hungry in that specific way that came from being told no your whole life and deciding tonight was the night you stopped listening. They stood under a busted streetlight in the Blake Gardens courtyard, voices low, gestures sharp. One of them kept touching his waistband, checking, adjusting, reminding himself it was there. Green light on arrival. Everybody knew the rules when that word got whispered. No negotiations. No warnings. Just blood and consequences. Dominoes falling in a pattern older than the apartments themselves. Melvin stepped out of shadows between 2 buildings, hoodie pulled low. They saw him, registered the size, the way he moved, and reached anyway. One pulled a pistol, compact, 9mm, probably stolen. Melvin was already moving. He closed the distance in 3 steps, faster than someone his size should move, and swept the gun hand down and away, trapping the wrist, twisting until tendons screamed and fingers opened involuntarily. The pistol clattered to the pavement. The second man swung wild, a haymaker with nothing behind it but adrenaline and bad decisions. Melvin slipped it, stepped inside, and drove an elbow into the solar plexus. The man folded like cheap furniture, gasping, legs giving out. The third tried to run. Melvin caught him by the back of the collar, yanked him backward off his feet, and dropped him face first onto the concrete. Not hard enough to break anything permanent, just hard enough to make tomorrow hurt and next time feel heavier. He faded all 3 clean, fast, efficient. No speeches. No, you could be better than this monologues. No illusions that words would change what experience and environment had already carved into bone. Just enough damage to interrupt the plan, and by time. He dragged them into the light, the one functioning street lamp at the edge of the courtyard, and left them where patrol cars would eventually find them. Guns unloaded, clips separated, scattered just far enough to be annoying. Melvin checked his phone. No new messages. He kept moving. Third stop, Southwick/Imperial Valley, 12:14 a.m. The drunk driver never touched the brakes. Melvin saw it from half a block away. Silver Camry weaving, overcorrecting, drifting into the wrong lane like gravity had stopped making sense. Headlights painting wild arcs across storefronts. And directly in its path, a man in the street. Mid-50s, work boots, reflective vest. Probably walking home from a late shift, cutting through because the sidewalk added 10 minutes, and his feet hurt. He froze, eyes wide, body locked, caught between panic and physics and the absolute certainty that he was about to die. Melvin didn't think. He moved, launched himself forward, legs pumping, closing 30 feet in seconds that felt like slow motion and lightning both. He hit the impact zone half a step ahead of the Camry, stepped in front of the car. The collision folded the hood like aluminum foil around a brick. The windshield spiderwebbed. Glass exploded outward in a glittering spray that caught streetlight and fell like snow. The engine screamed, metal grinding, belt shredding, something vital snapping with a sound like a gunshot, and then died completely. Radiator fluid hissing onto hot pavement. Melvin slid back a single step, boots scraping, leaving twin black marks on asphalt. He shook it off like rain, rolled his shoulders once, checked his hands for cuts, nothing serious. Then he walked over to the driver's side, popped the door with more force than strictly necessary, and looked down at the man slumped over the wheel, eyes half closed, breath coming in wet, irregular gasps. Bottle of Jack on the passenger seat, 3/4 empty. Melvin reached into the nearby cooler someone had left outside a corner store, probably forgotten after cookout, pulled out melting ice and lukewarm water, and dumped the entire thing straight onto the driver's face. The man sputtered, jerked upright, eyes snapping open wild and unfocused. "Stay awake," Melvin said. Not a suggestion, a command. He pulled his phone, dialed 911. Waited for the operator. Drunk driver. Silver Camry. Southwick and Imperial. Engine's dead. He's not going anywhere. He hung up before they could ask for his name. The man in the reflective vest was still standing in the street, staring, mouth open. "You good?" Melvin asked. The man nodded. Didn't speak. Couldn't. "Go home," Melvin said. The man went. Sirens rose in the distance, faint, then louder, converging. Melvin was already gone. Fourth stop, Twin Oaks Townhomes, 12:58 a.m. The door came apart easy. Too easy. Cheap hollow core construction, flimsy lock, hinges that had been loose since installation. One solid kick, and the whole thing swung inward with a crack that echoed through the breezeway. Melvin burst and ready to end a man's night permanently. Fists already clenched, adrenaline spiked, prepared for the worst-case scenario the neighborhood watch message had implied, and stopped. 2 women, one pinned against the kitchen counter, arm twisted behind her back, face pressed against laminate, the other standing over her, one hand gripping hair, the other cocked back mid-swing. The one on top was built like she'd learned early that force solved problems and kept solving them until people stopped asking questions. Broad shoulders, scarred knuckles, jaw set in a way that said this wasn't new. The other was bleeding from her nose, crying and hitching gasps, smaller than she'd looked in the photos someone had sent to the watch 3 weeks ago with the caption, "She won't leave." Melvin sighed. "Really?" he muttered. The aggressive one turned, mouth already forming words that didn't matter. Probably some variation of "mind your business," or "get the fuck out," or "you don't know what she did." Smack. Melvin slapped the shit out of her. Clean. Flat. Open palm across the cheek. Loud enough to echo. Hard enough to reset her nervous system. Her head snapped sideways. Eyes went glassy. Knees buckled. She dropped. Not unconscious. Just done. Sitting on the floor now. Hand pressed to her face. Looking up at Melvin with something between rage and shock in the sudden, terrible realization that she'd miscalculated badly. Melvin knelt beside the other woman, the one still against the counter, trembling, blood dripping onto cheap tile. "Breathe," he said quietly. "Help's coming. This wasn't your fault." She looked at him, really looked, eyes searching his face for something she couldn't name. "Even if it feels stupid that you stayed," Melvin added, because he knew that's what she was thinking, what they all thought. Her breath hitched. Fresh tears. He stood, glanced at the woman on the floor. "You move," he said, "and I come back." She didn't move. Melvin stepped outside, pulled the door as closed as it would go with broken hinges, and walked 20 feet down the breezeway. Sirens already rising. Someone had called it in. Probably a neighbor who'd heard the door break. Or maybe the woman herself before it got bad. Melvin checked his phone. 1:03 a.m. He was gone before the first patrol car turned the corner. Red and blue lights painting the complex in rotating color. End of patrol, 1:30 a.m. The phone went quiet. No new vibrations. No new pictures. No new emergencies that required a man who could stop cars with his body and preferred not to be thanked. Patrol complete. Melvin leaned against a brick wall outside a closed laundromat, checked the time, did the math automatically. 4 hours. Maybe. He had to be up at 4:30 a.m. Doc in 23 didn't care what kind of night you had. Cargo moved whether you were tired or not. Containers didn't unload themselves. Supervisors didn't accept "I was out stopping drunk drivers" as an excuse for clocking in late. He pulled his hoodie tighter against the pre-dawn chill, started the walk back to the Escalade. Above him, the sky was still dark, deep purple at the edges, waiting for sunrise like it had all the time in the world. The city kept breathing. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere else a door slammed. A car alarm went off 3 blocks over and cut out just as fast. Normal sounds. The city resetting itself, sorting through the debris of another night, preparing to try again. Melvin climbed into the Escalade, sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel. For stops. No deaths. No permanent damage. Just enough intervention to buy people one more day. He started the engine and drove home to get what sleep he could. Behind him, Southwick kept living. And somewhere in the dark, the neighborhood watch was already cataloging tomorrow's problems. Part 3. The alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. exactly. Not 4:29. Not 4:31. Exactly 4:30. Because Melvin had said it that way, and his phone didn't negotiate. His eyes opened before his hand moved, body already awake, brain catching up a second later. The sound wasn't loud, just sharp enough to cut through whatever shallow sleep he'd managed to steal in the 3 hours since he'd gotten home. He rolled onto his side and slapped the phone quiet with one heavy palm. He was still on the couch, one sock missing. Hoodie twisted around his torso like he'd fought it in his sleep. Neck stiff from angle, that deep ache that started at the base of the skull and promised to stay all day. The TV was on. YouTube had autoplayed its way deep into a National Backshot League highlight mix, slow-motion hips rolling in perfect rhythm, crowd noise layered with bass-heavy music that thumped through cheap speakers, statistics flashing in the corner like it was stock footage instead of human bodies performing athletic feats that would have been impossible to explain to someone from 1950. He stared at it for half a second. A woman in purple and gold executing a flawless dismount, the arena exploding. Then reached over and turned the screen off. Silence. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of someone upstairs walking to their own bathroom, floorboards creaking in the specific pattern that meant Mrs. Chun was up early again. No groaning, no hesitation, no bargaining with himself about 5 more minutes. He stood up. The workout wasn't a ritual. It was maintenance. The same way you changed oil or rotated tires or checked smoke detector batteries. Necessary upkeep to keep the machine functional. He didn't do it because he loved it. He did it because the alternative was entropy, and entropy got people killed. He checked the time once, just to anchor it in his head, then started. Push-ups. No breaks. No counting out loud. Just breath and floor and shoulders burning in a way that felt honest. The kind of pain that had a purpose. Down, up. Chest to linoleum. Arms locking out. Core tight. The apartment was quiet except for his breathing and the soft percussion of palms hitting tile. 1,500. Crunches next. The couch creaked under his heels as he locked them down against the frame for leverage. Hands behind his head, elbows wide, spine curling up one vertebra at a time. Exhale on the way up. Inhale on the way down. No momentum. All muscle. 1,500. Incline bench. The bar was already loaded, 325 pounds, waiting in the corner where he'd left it last night, or the night before, or whenever the last time was he'd been home long enough to use it. The metal sang low as he lifted it free from the makeshift rack he'd built out of cinder blocks and hope. Press, rack, press, rack. The rhythm was meditative, mechanical. The weight didn't care if he was tired. It just was, and either he moved it or he didn't. 1,500 reps. By the end, his chest felt like it was full of broken glass, and his arms were shaking just enough to remind him he was still human. Squats after. Deep. Controlled. Knees tracking over toes. Spine straight. Core braced like he was holding the world on his shoulders instead of just his own body weight. Down until his hamstrings touched his calves. Up until his legs locked out. No weights. Didn't need them. Not with 250 pounds of body weight and the kind of muscle density that came from being HELAX-enhanced and genetically stubborn. 2,000. Then 4 minutes of shadowboxing. No mirror. No opponent. No heavy bag to hit or speed bag to time. Just angles, slips, short bursts of controlled violence pulled tight and reeled back in before they could become something else. Jab, cross, slip left. Hook, uppercut, step back. Footwork light, despite his size. Moving like someone had taught him once, and he'd never forgotten. He checked the time again. 4:55 a.m. Right on schedule. The shower was fast. Hot enough to loosen his shoulders and wash the night off his skin. Not long enough to let his mind wander into places it didn't need to go. He let the water run over his face and down his back. Watched it swirl into the drain like everything else eventually did. Blood, sweat, bad decisions, good intentions. All of it went the same place. He shut the water off, towel dry, and stepped into the steam-fogged bathroom that smelled like cheap soap and mildew the landlord refused to fix. Kitchen next. A big bowl of Captain Crunch, the real kind, not the off-brand, because some things mattered even when nothing else did. Milk straight from the jug, poured until the cereal floated. He ate standing up at the counter, eyes unfocused, jaw working automatic, body already shifting into work mode. No coffee. Didn't need it. Never had. The HELAX gene kept his metabolism running hot enough that caffeine was redundant, just extra noise in a system that already operated on a frequency most people couldn't sustain. He finished the bowl, rinsed it in the sink, didn't wash it, just rinsed it. That was tomorrow's problem, and set it on the counter next to 3 others in various states of neglect. The uniform went on piece by piece. Denim work pants, Dickies, dark blue, worn soft in the knees and thighs from climbing ladders and kneeling on concrete. Melanon City college sweatshirt, faded purple and gold, the letters cracked and peeling, the cotton soft as skin from 100 washes. He played one season, got suspended, never went back. But he kept the sweatshirt because it reminded him of a version of himself that hadn't made all the wrong choices yet. Work boots laced tight, steel-toed, scuffed, reliable. Orange safety vest, high visibility, reflective strips. Supervisor stenciled across the back in block letters that had faded to gray. Gloves folded into the back pocket. Leather palms stained dark from months of handling cargo straps and chain links. Hard hat tucked under his arm, white with a Premier Shipping Company logo peeling off one side. Last came the badge. He pulled it from the counter where he'd left it last night, clipped it onto the vest, and smoothed it flat with one thumb. Premier Shipping Co. Melvin Thompson. Supervisor, Dock 23. MCPA number 681943. He checked himself in the dark reflection of the microwave door. Just a big man in work clothes, anonymous and unremarkable. The kind of guy you'd see 100 times and never remember once. Just a guy going to work. Just another morning. He grabbed his keys. Both phones, the clean one with his real number, and the quiet one that only vibrated, the one connected to the neighborhood watch and a dozen other networks he didn't talk about at the docks, and a blunt tucked into the side pocket of his jacket, like a promise he might not keep today. Wrapped tight in plastic, faintly sweet-smelling even through the layers. At 5:21 a.m., he locked the door behind him and stepped outside. The Escalade rolled smooth through empty streets, the city still half asleep around him. No traffic, no drama, just red lights turning green on time. Streets empty enough to feel respectful, like the city itself was giving him space to think. He took BCH 9 west toward the ports, merged onto I-281, watched Melanon City slide past in the blue-gray pre-dawn light. Warehouses, rail yards, the distant glow of city view where the financial district never actually slept, just dimmed its lights and pretended. 23 minutes to the west side ports. He made it in 21. The Melanon City Port Authority sprawled across the western edge of the city like an industrial cathedral, cranes rising into the sky like mechanical gods, shipping containers stacked in geometric mountains, painted every color shipping companies could trademark. The smell hit first, salt and diesel and morning, brine from Trinity Bay mixing with engine oil and the faint chemical tang of treated wood and rust. Melvin parked in the employee lot, same spot he always used, third row back, under a light that buzzed but still worked, cut the engine, and stepped out into the cool morning air. His breath misted faintly. Somewhere behind the stacks, the sun was starting to think about rising. Security waved him through at the main gate. Oscar, 60-something, retired MCPD, working second retirement because the pension didn't stretch as far as it used to. "Morning, Mel." "Morning," Melvin said back. Didn't stop, didn't slow. Just the acknowledgement two men gave each other when they both started work before the rest of the world woke up. Inside the main building, the receptionist smiled when she saw him, Vanessa, pretty in a way that didn't ask for anything, mid-30s, wedding ring, 2 kids whose photos were taped to her monitor. She'd been nice to him since day one, back when he was just another dock grunt and nobody knew his name. He nodded. She nodded back. That was enough. The time clock sat on the wall next to the bulletin board. Union notices, OSHA posters, a flyer for someone selling a jet ski. Melvin pulled his badge, swiped it through the reader, and waited for the beep. 5:57 a.m. 3 minutes early. As always, he pushed through the double doors and stepped out onto Dock 23. The port opened up in front of him, a canyon of steel and commerce, cranes already moving, cargo containers swaying on cables, forklifts beeping in reverse, workers in orange vests moving like ants through a structure too big to comprehend all at once. The base stretched out beyond the docks, water dark and flat in the early light, gulls circling overhead, calling to each other in voices that sounded like warnings. Melvin walked to the rail and put his hands on it, cold metal, slightly damp reel. He looked out over the cranes and containers as the sun started to creep up behind the stacks, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that would have been beautiful if he'd had the energy to notice. The city moved. Cargo shifted. Hydraulics hissed. Engines rumbled. Radios crackled with dispatch codes and container numbers. A forklift rolled past. The driver, Marcus, good kid, worked hard, lifted 2 fingers off the wheel in greeting. Melvin lifted his chin in response, and his normal day began. Melvin Thompson, Dock 23 supervisor. Not the neighbor, not a vigilante, not a hero, just a man with a job, standing on a dock, watching the sun come up over a city that didn't know how much of himself he'd given it in the dark. End of Chapter 1.